Hey everyone, thanks for joining us for our next conversation, the 1980 Advisory Conversation Series. We're going to talk today about the people challenges you have in your business as the business and the team grows. I'm Chris Mauser, Senior Advisor with 1980 Advisory, and we've got Trent Hadfield, the Lead Advisor. How are you today, Trent?
Great, thanks, Chris.
Going to be really interested to hear some of your thoughts on this as we go through, Trent. But I'm sure a lot of people listening to this have been through, when you first start a business, some of your first employees, they might be friends of family, they're your mates, and you're working with your friends, and it can be sort of a good environment. But as the business grows, your role changes, and that business dynamic, it changes. I remember my first practice, I had a team of about 4 people. I knew I knew their partners, I knew their kids' names, I knew their dogs' names. But my last practice had a team of almost 40, and that was a very different dynamic. I'm sure you've experienced a similar thing.
Yeah, it's always an interesting one, I think, with your friends or family. It's a natural thing, especially when you're starting out. You've got a small team, your first 1 or 2 hires, and the natural thing is, hey, who's close by me? Is it a friend or probably even more often a family member too? And that dynamic really changes over time. And also we'll talk a bit about it, but it's really is it a dynamic of, are they the right person in the right position?
Yes.
In that management, how do you separate the work environment versus the personal environment? And it really can present challenges which can grow over time. So really interested to hear your experiences, and then probably had a couple of ours too.
Yeah. And that's one of the other things really interested in talking about is that decision, when it does grow, do you actually promote from within, or do you actually bring someone in from outside the business? And we'll get onto that a little bit later, because I think there's some really interesting learnings and interesting things to consider when it comes to that. I think in terms of navigating that change, though, from that mate to manager role, some of the keys about it to me, you've really got to be quite intentional about how you do it. And that communication, really sitting down with the people, explaining what the role looks like and why that change is actually happening. I think they're some of the really big keys for it.
Very much so. For me, everything comes about having, I'll call it hard conversations early on. Sometimes that, even right from when, I've hired friends and stuff before in different businesses I'm involved with and stuff. And, I'll often have that conversation up front with people going, hey, look, it's great. Love to have you on board this business. If things go south, let's call it out right now. We're not going to let this, sour our relationship. Let's intentionally say this is going to be a work thing versus a personal thing. Is that a perfect solution? Probably not. But having some of those early conversations, really agreeing that you can be open to each other and that we're going to always communicate professionally, just as you would with any other employee or team member. Really just setting those boundaries early is absolutely core.
And a couple of the things there I was going to really touch on is that consistency, being consistent with new employees and those existing employees, because the relationships are different, but you can't be seen to be playing favourites. But you can't overcompensate either. You've got to be really careful that you can't then sort of go too far and actually be seen for to being sort of almost too critical of those longer standing team members, because you don't want to be seen to be playing favourites. So it's a bit of a
you have to always play the fair game. Everybody looks at, when you talk to a staff member or whatever it is, people are always reflecting onto themselves. And so, as I say, if you're seen to be playing favourites, it's always going to go bad. If you're seen to be too harsh, it's going to go bad. It is, so you've got to be careful. And whether it be the mates or not, one of my big things is, always be careful about when somebody's not in the room, like how you talk about somebody that's not in the room, because the people that are in the room, they're sitting there. You might be thinking, oh yeah, I'm getting one up. There was this ex-staff member and I'm sort of saying, oh, they were no good for the business anyway, or whatever it is. But then everybody sitting around the table is starting to reflect on themselves, going, well, if they prepare to say that when that person's gone, what do they think of me today? Now.
Exactly.
So 100% being fair, and it's being fair in communication, being fair in the roles, responsibilities, promotion, everything, being very intentional about it.
Yeah. And one other thing I really want to sort of call out again, you mentioned it as well, is that in that initial conversation, when you're sitting down talking with people, in really simple, clear language, say that while at work I might be a manager, but outside we're still friends, and that's still important to me. It's still important that our relationship and how we actually interact outside of work isn't impacted by anything that happens at work.
Yeah, 100%. And not to go off track, but I sort of think about a lot of times, like when we help a business starting up, and often it's once again, it might be two mates starting a business together. And so we've got a different dynamic again, but a similar sort of thing where you've got a professional relationship versus the personal relationship. Our big thing is if you start a business with other individuals, even if it's family or whatever, get your business ownership agreement in place. Have those discussions up front. How are we making our decisions in this business? How are we, all these eventualities and stuff, and I won't go too far in it right now, but having that same discussion, basically going, hey, this is it. We're setting the rules of the road, have some hard conversations up front.
And I think that does touch on a really good point, is sometimes you actually do need someone else to be that soundboard, and it might be an external advisor like us here at 1980 that we can help with some of those conversations, help set up some of those ongoing meeting rhythms as well. So you do have those regular one-on-ones, you have that structure, and you have that right sort of cadence for those meetings. Yeah. And
we can play a bad guy too. That's one of the things. I'll often have these meetings and go, look, I'm going to throw stuff at you guys, like as a client, and I do it deliberately. Say, look, I'll tell you, I'm going to charge stuff which is going to challenge you. I'm not trying to rattle you or anything like that, but you need to have these hard conversations. You might not think of them yourself because obviously we've had that broad experience. We've worked with many businesses through those same conversations. So we've seen what's gone right, what's gone wrong. There's always something new, but long time in the business, you sort of start to think you've seen everything, but you definitely haven't. But we draw on that experience and go, we're going to challenge you. We're going to say, what about this? I was just in a conversation last week with a client and or a new client, and we were talking about, they've got their business agreement in place between multiple business owners. And I'm like, and I just threw out there, I said, well, what happens if one of you pass away? It's the classic one which we always deal with. What happens? Yeah. And it was interesting. All of a sudden in that meeting, there was a differing opinion. And like, they'd supposedly had this discussion several years ago, and it brought it up because one of them's like, the one initial response was, my wife, whoever's wife will just jump in on the board, and the other one sort of goes, well, I wouldn't want my you have to work with my wife.
That's it. So they're not easy discussions to have, and if you don't think about it early on.
And so that was a business which apparently had gone through this process at some time ago. Yeah, I brought it up, and they're like, oh, hang on a minute. Maybe we do need to revisit this because
that's where that fresh eyes, a different way of looking at it, just throwing those different ideas around in these conversations can actually be really quite helpful.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And we had a few notes. I'm just having a look at what we sort of brought
we'll go off track a bit.
There we are. So I think, we've sort of touched on that a little bit. So, we're all mates, but that has to change at some point as the business gets bigger. And the owner's role, we didn't really touch much on the owner's role changing as well. But as the business gets bigger, you might be less on the tools and you're a lot more involved in decision making. And that really creates that dynamic change where they're used to working alongside you, perhaps in the day-to-day business, but all of a sudden you're in the office, you're on the computer, you're checking your emails a few times a day, you're having to make a lot more decisions. So that comes back to that being sort of setting those intentional expectations, making sure people actually understand why your role is different and what your role actually entails now.
And I think it can be a little bit extra collaborative with those mates too in the business. Acknowledge that there is that relationship. And rather than, and if you've got sort of a hierarchical structure for that, understand what that mate that's working in business actually wants. Have that open conversation. Going, hey, we're different levels now. I'm, here or whatever. Do you actually want to be, you might be assuming that the mate wants to become the general manager of operations, but you know what? That mate might be just happy continuing on the tools. So just actually asking them, hey, what do you want out of this business? Look, I am giving you a little bit of an inside running here. Let's match where your skill set is, where you want to be. So everybody's very clear on where they stand, rather than awkwardness, because you get a two-way thing too. With if we're talking sort of more of a promotion or progression thing, you get is the mate that gets unfairly progressed ahead, but then is it also a mate that gets given this responsibility where they actually don't really want the responsibility? They're happy just to turn up, do their job,
I like that perspective, though. It really brings to mind sort of one of the things that I've always believed in is that with any change management, you need to listen more than talk in the early stages of it. And so, finding out what do your mates want, what do the staff want, what do the rest of your team, what actually means something to them about this business, and where do they see themselves progressing and going into it?
Yeah, and to go a few steps down track, if we're growing a bigger business. Is there also an element, and we work a lot on employee share plans and employee incentive schemes. Yeah. Is that something which is going to smooth things over? Like, is there ever going to be some sort of tension about money? And obviously, we never like to, as business owners, we don't want to sort of say, there's always a perception. Often the perception is that business owners are making a lot more money than they actually are in reality, too. But that can often become that point of tension as it down track with that relationship. Where you're going, hey, we've worked in this business together for 15 years, and look, you've made all this money and I'm just still here on a wage. So this is another idea to go, hey, if you're at that size, and often we talk about probably 10 plus employee sizes when we start thinking about employee share plans and those sorts of things, do we actually carve a bit out? So you're actually going, we're giving back to our employee group, and that might include your mates there, and that so they get a bit of a cut of the action too.
That's it. Yeah, fantastic for that sort of that retention and really making sure that there's that alignment with where the business is going. But I think that conversation really leads nicely into sort of that second part of what we really wanted to talk about is sort of that promotion side of things. The business grows, you need a little bit more leadership structure, and there's two choices. Do you promote from within, or do you actually bring in someone from outside? And I've done both and had success with both, and probably had failures with both, to be honest, as well.
It's an age-old question. I think every person in management consulting that's probably had the discussion many a time, and it's horses for courses.
Yes.
You've got to really think about and be intentional, and that word intentional keeps coming up, about what we're trying to do here. For me, always look to the inside first, because if you hire somebody externally and you've got somebody internally which believe they might have been in line for that position or deserved, you're also going to run the risk of losing that person, getting them offside, and that's going to be even more pronounced if it is a friend or family member or that and the likes. But it is always that is there an internal one. There's also this thing that I have to remember the study, which basically, or this concept, which basically goes, we often have this view of people when we first get to know them. So it's that whole grass is always greener sort of a thing, where you hire somebody and you hire them, as a junior or intermediate staff member, and they've been with your business for 5-10 years. And you know what? They've grown. They've built their experience. They know your business. But you still have this lens on of what they were like when you first worked with them. That's a really good perspective. And so you really actually have to, hold up their resume. Actually go, okay, we've got these external applicants for a role. Take the lens on not what I know them as, because you have this sort of
you've almost
call back a little bit. Go, where are they actually in their career?
Yeah.
What do they know? What are those secret little things that they come in, which somebody from the outside doesn't know our systems and processes, doesn't know our client base, doesn't know all these different things. There's all these little pluses, which we have forgotten to assign to them, because we've still got a perception of, hey, this is this new graduate. But now they're actually 20 years into a career and quite experienced, and you'll still see them as that, the young'un.
Yeah. But I agree though. I always have that very strong preference to promote from within. But you do need to look at what that role needs. And it may be that it is something that there's someone either, there may not be anyone in the team interested, or they may not have the skills, and you might be able to look at putting in a bit of a development plan for them to move them to it. But sometimes bringing in someone from outside, they've got fresh ideas, a different perspective on things, which can add some benefit. So you do really need to look at, what does the business need? What does the role need? How important is that internal loyalty compared to sort of that bringing in those skills from outside, and really look at what is right for this business at this moment in time.
Yeah, 100%. And it is exactly like, what is what we need right now? Is there a hybrid approach too? Is it, really, it's good. And just yesterday I was working through it with a client again, that their org chart and those key roles within the business and stuff. And that's not a static thing. I'm one that doesn't get hung up. I don't get hung up on traditional titles all the time, but going, what's the function of this? And going, is it that we go, yes, there's that internal hire which can do some of it. They don't have the skill sets here. Probably they could get training, but do they want to do training or not? But do we redefine what we're looking for in the roles? Do we get a couple of part-time roles or fractional roles and marry them up? And so you're getting what you want as a business, bringing in that new talent, because the opportunity is if you get somebody from external, they can bring in fresh blood, fresh ideas. Not always a good thing. Yeah. Sometimes it's a good thing. You've got to sort of take a pretty critical eye on that one too. And if you are hiring for external, do you go down the path of going, okay, if there was that internal person, that mate or otherwise, do we need to redefine their role maybe, as part of the restructuring? So maybe they're not feeling like they're almost getting an inadvertent demotion because they reported, they might have reported direct to you as the manager, and then all of a sudden this manager gets put in between the two of you, go, well, we're actually going to give you this extra redefinition of your role, so it's sort of a sideways move and the person slotting in as a team. And
as part of that hybrid type of role as well, is there then a training plan so that then when another opportunity does arise, that internal hire or that internal candidate is actually best placed to be able to put their hand up for it. So sometimes you do need to be able to really forward plan for that. And sometimes that can be quite difficult, really sort of forecasting and forward planning. And again, that's something we can help. So 1980 we can really help to look at sort of what the roles you have now, what's that strategy and direction where you're going, and really help to sort of decide, forward plan for what those positions you might need in the future.
And like I was saying before, with that discussion with those mates in the business, actually having that, what do you want to do in the business? Where do you want to go? And go, I can see you one day. We're never making big promises, but I can see you one day stepping into the general manager of XYZ role. But the skills that you're going to need to get from here to there, you may need an extra qualification or a bit of extra training. So, before I give you the role, go and do this short course, online course. I mean, that's the great thing we are today. There is never a better time. If you're not too hung up on having a certificate of illustrious institution on your wall, there is so many short courses in anything you want online. That's right. You go, hey, you want to get more into the marketing of the business? Well, okay, go do a couple of online courses in marketing, build your skills up, so then when we're at that time, you can step into the role. So really forward planning it out and getting in front of it, rather than sort of going, we'll give you the role and then we figure it out later. Going, show me that you can do that work. And that's sort of, once again, it breaks down that barrier of, that mate to just getting the job going. If you go and do this, take a bit of initiative, we'll cover the costs of, and it's something I'm big on with businesses. I always, promoting, funding development, personal development, professional development, those sorts of things, is going, well, I'm only happy to pay for a course for you. You got to go find the course and sign up and do the work. And then there's potential for this role in your future.
Exactly. Yeah. Support your team, and they will really help support you. And it really came back into my mind as you were talking there, Trent, with really bringing the team on the journey. It really comes back to looking at those incentives, the structural incentives, the employer share plans. And anyone watching this, if you're wanting more information, Trent's got a great webinar. Go and look it up. There's really some really good information. And if you're wanting to have a conversation, we can really talk about that, because that really helps to build that loyalty and really keep the business alignment and performing the way that you want it to.
100%, yeah. And that's what we're all about. It's all about aligning the business with the employee group, be it financially, but also just, in a more job satisfaction, when people, you break down those barriers of us and them. And that's where it is great to have mates on board. When they are, I'm happy to be there supporting you and those sorts of things. It really is a good thing.
Yeah. Oh, another great conversation there, Trent. And it was nice to actually have it in the office rather than online as well. So to be meeting face to face. So really looking forward to our next conversation.
Absolutely. Thanks, Chris.
Thanks.